approval then? All right. Any business arising from the minutes? I'm hearing none. Let's move right into reports. So we have Robert. You can take the floor and go through the application for the variance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So just to run up to speed again, and just as a reminder,
Robert, just 1 second here. Sorry, it's Greg again. If everyone can put your mics on mute while the presentation is being done, then we'll open up the floor after the presentation is done. That way, there's no background noise. Thanks. Okay, go ahead, Robert.
Right, so just to bring everyone up to speed again, we're dealing with 3 variances regarding temporary use. These are located on all 3, which are water lots. Now, water lot is basically a pre-Confederation lot in which its boundaries or property lines reside completely or fully within navigable waterways. These lots are contained within the municipal boundary and thus subject to the Planning Act, which regulates land use. Now, at the same time, because it is a navigable waterway, we're dealing with multiple jurisdictional authorities regarding the land use itself. So we're dealing with the federal government as well as the provincial government. So these governmental agencies, they all maintain jurisdiction over one aspect or another pertaining to water lots. So federal government maintains jurisdiction over navigable waters. The provincial government, in regards to these applications, retain approval from a public health perspective for the eating establishments. The fire marshal conducts inspections. Electrical plumbing hookups are all done through the province. And then, of course, the liquor license approval is through PI Liquor Commission. From a municipal perspective, the City of Charlottetown deals with water lots in a variety of ways, but 3 main points is 1, the city's fire department enforces NFPA 1, which connects to NFPA 303, which is fire protection for marinas, as well as NFPA 96 for cooking equipment that would be used for the eating and drinking establishments. Also, our utility department works in conjunction with the provincial government, the Department of Environment, in regards to ensuring that grey water isn't dumped into navigable waterways or in the marinas. So this would be effectively a requirement to be connected to full municipal services, both sewer and water. And then last but not least, we're dealing with land use planning. Before, since the property boundaries or the lots are within the municipal boundaries, the Planning Act prevails and applies to these uses. So for the first application, 5 Great George Street, water lot PID 335307, it's a request for a temporary use for the 2020 season to operate various floating commercial uses consisting of eating and drinking establishments, recreational equipment rentals, and then 4 liveaboard vessels to be used for short-term rental purposes. And this is kind of a photo that highlights how the floating food court was operating last season. The water lot under question is highlighted here off of our property ownership map. It encompasses PK Marina. The proposal and the site plan submitted by the applicant, Robert and Lisa Gale, is basically delineating a portion of the marina to the floating eating and drinking establishment equipment rentals, which is in the corner there. There's 2 points of entry through gangway planks that lead down from the land down to the actual floating docks that maintain and support all the structures. They also currently have 4 floating cottages or float homes that is along the side, and that is used for short-term rental purposes. So effectively, what you see before you is more or less how this whole commercial operation was set up last season in 2019. The concept that the applicant has submitted that was prepared by 9 Yards is as follows. As you can see, there's a variety of structures consisting of eating establishments as well as equipment rentals, and an area for occupants to sit down and either consume the food or rent out water equipment like kayaks. Just another perspective, looking from the water, from the marina upland. In regards to when we sent out letters pertaining to the temporary use variance, we received a variety of letters of support that's been included in your packages. There was various residents that commented on supporting new types of developments, encourage additional revenues and traffic to the area. There was comments regarding supporting local businesses during the pandemic and supporting new concepts for floating uses. And since the report was published and sent out to the board members yesterday, our office received 4 additional letters, all of which have been circulated to yourselves. And you can refer to those letters to specifically Paul Madden and the other one by David Toombs, both in support of the proposal. We've also received a couple of letters of opposition. Some were from business owners in the area that cited safety concerns pertaining to the structures and lack of building code standards, as well as the additional competition. Businesses already struggling in the area, and so there was 2 letters that stated that they feel that this would negatively impact their occupancy and the use of their restaurants. Some other issues that were stated were a lack of parking and loading zones for the proposed floating development, or parking requirements at all. And then we've had 2 comments, one through a letter and then one through a resident phoning in that stated that the proposal that's before you today is an increase in intensity than what was there last season. They stated that it's an increase in seating capacity for the occupants, and there was additional businesses that were added. Since the report was published and sent off, we received 2 additional letters that objected to this proposal, both which were circulated to the board. In conclusion, the recommendation stands as follows. The planning board is to move ahead with support for this application's proposal to council. It would be done so under the following conditions. And just to quickly list off conditions, the proposal must meet all federal acts, regulations, standards, as well as confirmation submitted to the Planning and Heritage Department that the 3 liveaboard vessels, and that actually should be 4, because we did receive 3 letters, but there should be a 4th one there, have obtained licenses from Transport Canada for those vessels, as well as they must meet all provincial acts, regulations, and standards. Another condition is that the floating docks must be designed by an appropriate engineer with documentation, such as a letter of assurance that states the capacity load and that in fact the dock can support both the structures, cooking equipment, as well as the occupant load that's planned to be down there. We also received comments from fire department that they stated the fire prevention bylaw and the NFPA code 303 and 96 requirements have to be met, as well as the implementation of a fire standpipe system, Class 1. They also stated that a fire safety plan should be available on-site for occupants at all times. The City Water and Sewer Department has stated that they would require that any development in the marina be connected to full municipal services, sewer, and water. And finally, the copy of insurance for the floating developments provides third-party liability coverage for operators, owners of the water lot, and the City of Charlottetown. And that's it for that application. I can take any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Robert. So just to be clear on this, so I know there's 7 kids that exist, but there are these three variances that we're looking at today that are they basically to allow for status quo operation last year, or is this to intensify?
That's a good question, Mr. Chair. According to the information that we received, the 3 temporary use variance applications applies because there's 3 different water lots with 3 individual PIDs. The proposal that I just went over today is very similar, I guess, to what they propose or how they operated last season. As I stated during the presentation, we did receive a letter from a local business owner, as well as we were contacted by another adjacent business owner that stated that these operations apparently increase intensity by increasing the occupant load, the seating area, as well as the businesses. Again, the planning department can neither confirm nor deny that's the case, since we weren't taking in account of what was operating in last season. However, I will state that the next application that's on the agenda would be a change to what was there last season, and that is in regards to the 4 float homes. So last season, the 4 float homes were located within the Peaks K Marina. That was there with the floating commercial food court. But the next application for temporary use is that they're proposing to relocate those float homes to another water lot owned by CADC. And that would be a change from last season.
Okay. So when you say next application, is it one of these applications here that the temporary use?
That is correct. That would be effectively for the water lot identified as PID 335330, and that would be just south of the Confederation Landing.
Okay. All right. I'm going to open the floor up to any questions or comments.
Just a clarification, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Robert, number 2 is about the short-term rentals. And those short-term rentals, they want to move them from where they presently are in around the food court out to the south side of the Confederation Landing Park. And number 3, number 3 temporary use in number 335430, that's for the Steamers restaurant, or what's that for?
That's correct. That would be a similar application for a floating eating and drinking establishment. That was the previous Steamers restaurant. That's now, I believe, the Court and Cass. Right.
And that'll stay over on the east side of the marina, where you have the Charlottetown Harbor Authority.
That is correct. So that business, which has been operating there according to the applicants for the past 8 years, is remaining in the same location it has been.
Just 2 more quick questions, Mr. Chair.
Sure, Your Worship.
Just a clarification. Did you mention David Toombs or Peter Toombs supported? I didn't. Did he send in a letter? Was it David Toombs? Peter Toombs. Did I hear that correctly? Supporting the application.
Yes.
Is that part of our? I'm looking through the package now.
Oh, those were forwarded to you. We received those letters this morning, so those were just forwarded before the meeting.
Is that the addendums? The attachment B?
The letter 1 and letter 2 that Ellen sent at 8:30 today.
Is it from Peter Toombs, David Toombs?
Peter Toombs, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. And the last question is, so what's the square footage of the temporary use for water lot floating development in number 335307? What's the square footage of the floating dock? Do we have that?
That was not provided by the applicant.
Okay, because you can't use last year as a comparison because there was nothing there that we were trying to regulate. So we're starting afresh this year. Can we get a square footage of what the floating dock is for June 1st, 2020?
That's something that I can request of the applicant, yes.
Okay, so I'd just like to have that as part of the recommendation, what the square footage is for that facility. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Hi, Robert. Bobby here.
Hi, Bobby.
Under the provincial government jurisdictions, there's no mention of assessment or taxation. Is that an oversight, or does it not belong in there?
That's a comment that we didn't receive or didn't consult with the assessment or taxation for water lots. We were just purely dealing with the land use component and the operation of those water lots, so taxation was not something that we got into.
Okay, thank you.
One question there, Chair.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Drawn.
The recommendations there that were made, were they passed on to the Gales and you know, are they okay with them, or are some of these recommendations gonna put undue strain on them, or you know, are they in full compliance with them? Are they aware of them? That's the thing I'm asking.
Sure, Robert, can you answer that?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Drawn. They were forwarded the reports with those conditions. I will note that they have actually satisfied some of these conditions that are listed in the report. When they operated last season, for example, they informed us they obtained approval from the Public Health Department for the eating and drinking establishments, as well as the Liquor Commission approval for the serving of alcohol. So they also were in correspondence with our city utility department, where they hooked up to municipal services, as well as they were in conversations with also our fire department on some fire prevention safety measures that had to have been installed in the marina. So there are some of these conditions that they have already met. There are some conditions that they have to actually follow up with us. And these conditions that staff recommend and put forward is basically to ensure that the operation, because it operated within impunity last season, so these standards are in place just to ensure that there's some measure of safety and adherence to both provincial and municipal requirements.
Okay, thank you. I'm just concerned we're not putting an undue ask onto them just before opening here. So, you know, safety concerns and things like that, you know, there's no question. Insurance and things, that seems all pretty standard. So I'm just hoping we're not putting pressure on them to abide by something that they, you know, it's going to come up with a whole bunch of money and stuff like that right before they're opening. So this looks good. I just hope that they're aware of that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Drawn. Any other questions or comments for the board?
Yeah, Craig, can I make a question to Robert?
Sure, Reg.
At the bottom of page 3, it says, presently it is still unclear what level of government has the authority to ensure that the floating structures and docks that they reside on is safe for occupants. Staff would note that our knowledge is there is no level of government that's specifically reviewing the structural integrity of the structures and the safety of the floating dock system. With these recommendations, Robert, are you satisfied that we are covering off those?
Again, the reference you mentioned in the report, it's true. We're still in the midst of trying to determine what level of government, if any, wishes, again, to take the responsibility of signing off on the floating structures and the docks. The one condition we have in the report is that we have a letter of assurance from an engineer that can actually certify and ensure that the docks can support the occupant load as well as the weight load of the structures and the cooking equipment. Staff is still researching in the midst of for, again, a long-term strategy. If council decide to adopt regulations, how would structures be reviewed from a building or structural analysis perspective? Needless to say, at the end of the day, you know, we're putting forward conditions. It's better to have something down there, and it's better to have at least some conditions, some letter of insurance from engineers to ensure that at least some criteria safety measures are met, rather than, again, what's operating now is there's really nothing. Last season there was no approvals for these structures or the floating dock. So what we're proposing is at least better than nothing in an absence of regulation.
But at the end of the day, Robert, the liability of this, are we putting the residents of Charlottetown liable for something that goes wrong?
Again, I would probably defer that. That's more of probably a legal question. As I stated, what we're proposing is basically the basic measures of safety that we can that we can attest to, and that's really the capacity load and the letter of assurance in regards to the docks. Again, no assurance can be offered in regards to the structures because they haven't gone through a structural analysis or even a building code review, since the building code does not apply to floating structures or structures that are not affixated to land. So we're left in this limbo position where we have structures, being operated and occupied, and we have no really standard or technical standard to measure these structures in regards to the building code, because it simply does not apply in this case.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Is there any other comments or questions?
Just one more, Chair. When we first put this out, it said the federal and provincial governments were the overseers of the waterways, and when we talk about safety here, isn't the federal and provincial government, isn't there rules in place already for safety? And I'm sure they're not just putting out a dock here and hoping for the best. I'm well aware that they have insurance and there's safety standards in place. So I don't know why we're in a rush to do this, but if you think, if this is a safety concern, like that just keeps coming up. I thought that the federal and provincial governments had that in hand. I'm just not sure why that keeps coming up. They have operated for a number of years, and there was never a safety issue as I know. Because the federal and provincial government had the standards in place. So I just kind of question what we're doing, but you guys obviously know more than I do on this. But thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Braun.
Oh, sorry. I just want to jump in for a second because for me, I'm trying to wrap my head around all this. He's got to be important, but with the unknowns, like that first step of going back to who is responsible for what, I'm thinking like, shouldn't some of that information be clarified before we're moving ahead?
Well, when we talked about that, Julie, about the regulatory framework, and I think we had that last meeting, and I think there was, I think felt like we were rushing it along, and I think there was a lot of confusion, a lot of questions that still need to be answered. So that's why we kind of delayed that piece of work. The question now is just really was my understanding was to kind of get the businesses up and going for this year with using a temporary use variance. And operating pretty much the status quo as last year. What complicates this a little bit is the fact that there are some proposed changes to the plan, and like I said, I don't want to say it muddies the water. It just muddies the water.
And part of the confusion is we're applying for temporary variances and this is where I'm a little more confused. Is we're applying for variances on something that's not even in place. So I'm trying to wrap my head around it and understand, but I'm kind of like, I'm agreeing with Councillor Duran in the sense that, safety, absolutely, something around, that, but the bigger stuff I think really needs to be ironed out and do it right.
But again, listen, I appreciate, and listen, I think there's a lot of confusion here too, but again, we did have a legal opinion that said that we should be identifying the land use. And I guess to do nothing, and this is why I said last meeting, is putting our head in the sand like an ostrich even an option? The answer is no. We have to do something. And this is why we're here to even identify a temporary use, basically, for these until we can figure out, I guess, some of the questions that we all want answers to. That's kind of where we're at. Am I right or wrong, Alex or Robert?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
It's Alex here. Yeah, the bottom line is that we are clearly 100% have the ability to regulate the land use. That's not a question. It's the safety component does not readily, the only tool that we have is the National Building Code, and it doesn't apply in the situation. But the bottom line, I guess, for you folks is that to our knowledge, and there's nobody that's really evaluating what is done on every other property in the city It's that review that the building that is sitting on a piece of ground is safe, and then all of the other approvals will flow from it. So we're just trying to cover that territory for this year, get a structural engineer to confirm that there isn't an issue, and then again, as we do our research, if there's a level of, if the federal government wants to take on that element to deal with the safety sign-off, or the provincial government, we would be more than willing to yield to them. But the reality is now we don't think anybody is dealing with it, and it is a highly unusual situation that the structural integrity of a building, or in this case, a dock, has not been reviewed for its structural integrity or some level of safety.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Mr. Chair, we were, through Robert Zilk and Mr. Forbes, they were proposing a water lot zoning, and at our last meeting, or the meeting before last, we decided that was going too fast, as you already said. So this temporary use is just to provide a temporary use. But look at the recommendations in terms of safety. Confirmation from the fire department that the fire prevention bylaw requirements have been met. Confirmation from the city water and sewer department that uses of floating development are fully connected to city water, city sewer, and water supply. Floating docks must be designed by appropriate engineer with appropriate documentation. So we're ensuring that there will be safety here. This is a life safety requirement, but I think this is just temporary confirmation or temporary use variance. And as you said earlier, this is to provide a status quo operation as that existed last year. And then come the winter of 2020, 2021, we'll look at a bylaw to regulate these water lots. And Alex Forbes has said this many times. We're in a very unique position because we're one of, and again, Victoria, I don't know where Victoria is in terms of pre-Confederation lots, because BC joined Confederation in 1905. I just think that we have to look at, here's what we have, and I think these are great recommendations, and it gives me a level of assurance that there will be life safety requirements provided in this development under a temporary use variance.
Yeah, Your Worship, thank you. And again, when we keep going back to status quo, I just want to be sure that when we say status quo, I see in the application here that they're...
Can I just have one comment, Greg, and then I'll be quiet?
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So the thing I know our fire inspector goes down and checks on this stuff down there. I'm just asking, so we have a dock out in Victoria Park. Would that go through the same type of standards of an engineer drawing or approval? Like, do we have to have the same thing as we're asking these people?
Good point.
For a dock in Victoria Park?
It's Alex here. The bottom line is that the docking system that's out in Victoria Park is designed specifically for its intended purpose, and that's just for people to walk on it.
Not commercial use.
Right. This is a much different entity where you've got cooking vessels and storage and all kinds of things happening. This is a commercialized dock, and it's highly unusual to have a commercialized dock. So it would be a standard applied to the one that this purchase, or the one that was purchased for Victoria Park. And again, because of its use, it's exactly what it was used for. This is a dock that it may be able to meet that standard, but it's for somebody else to determine that it is meeting what that dock was designed for, the weight component, and the uses that are on top of it.
One's for pleasure, one's for business.
Right.
Okay, is that Councillor Ron?
Well, yeah, it just, I get back to it's been operating for a number of years. The federal government, the provincial government have all the safety standards in place, but now we're going above and beyond that and implementing our own. I'm sure they have insurance. I'm sure they're safe, but you know, I don't know what else to add to it. It seems like we're getting involved in something at this point in time that's very stressful. I agree 100% with safety, but sure, they're inspected every year. I just don't want to, well, that's my own opinion, but thank you very much. You've answered a lot of my questions.
Councillor Drawn, just to reiterate that we have to get involved to some capacity here from a land use issue, because we've got a legal opinion that says that we should. So this is kind of, we have to go down this direction. The reason why we stalled the other regulatory framework that we are looking to put in place was to get all of these questions answered around whose responsibility it is, be it federal, provincial, and everything else. So again, this is just, like I said, really the intent of this was to kind of allow for the businesses to operate status quo as they did last year, because I think we can all agree that there was certainly value and it was popular. And again, we're not trying to, I don't think the city in any capacity is trying to impede on helping business open up. The question really then becomes, around is it status quo? I guess that's where I'm a little bit confused. Because I look at the applications. So Robert, I guess my question back to you, just to be very clear, the floating homes were last year within the marina itself. Are they proposing that those floating homes stay within the marina, or are they proposing that they go out onto the lot in front of Confederation Landing?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Basically, the next application, which is the proposal of relocating those 4 float homes, because last season they were located in the marina. There was a level of fire safety in regards to the marina's held to. They have the next temporary use variance is to relocate those float homes outside of the marina and south of the Confederation Landing, and that's what would constitute a change of how it operated last season.
My point being that this technically is the status quo, so I just want to make sure the board understands that as we go through this, that it's not everything status quo. So just okay. So let's.
Mr. Chair,
does anyone have any other questions? Okay, yeah. Yes.
Mr. Chair, if you look at number 1 for variances, it's to keep the floating commercial businesses in place. Last year, that those Airbnbs were part of this PID number 335304. This year they want to move that to PID number 335364. But the businesses of what they'll be offering through Nimrods, Tip Lady, they'll all continue to exist. That's what I'm talking about, status quo. As for the next issue, number two,
yes,
is a change in use from what we discussed earlier or a couple of weeks ago.
I'm looking at this. It's a good point. I'm looking at this more in its totality, right? As opposed to individual variances. I'm just looking at the whole project. As when I talk about status quo. So if no one has questions, let's deal with the first variance. Number 1, the temporary variance for the loss. And see where the PID number of 335307. Robert, and that is to basically maintain the floating dock structure in place that housed the restaurants last year. Is that correct?
That's correct, as well as to maintain those 4 floating vessels within the marina as last year.
Yeah. And just to add, Robert, could you please get a square footage or the square footage of the floating docks that will be there this summer, so that we can use them as a reference?
I can do that. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So, is there any questions? Or comments with number 1, first variance?
Yeah, Greg. Yeah, I'm still confused on is this dock and businesses identical to what was in last year?
Robert, my understanding is number 1, the variance is suggesting that everything is the same as last year.
To Mr. Chair, when we had conversations with the applicant at time of applying for the application, that's what they stated to us. They stated that what they're proposing for this temporary use variance is what was there last season.
Okay. Does that answer your question, Reg?
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you.
No, you're very welcome. All right, so any other questions or comments with regards to the first variance?
It's Rosemary. I just wanted to say I'm comfortable with the recommendations on a temporary basis while we work on getting something more permanent in place.
Okay, so Mary, can I consider that as Rosemary, can I consider that as a motion on the floor to accept?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to accept the first variance to
Second.
basically maintain what was there last year. Okay, moved and seconded. All right,
Seconded.
is there any further comments, questions?
Question.
Declared. Okay, all right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Aye.
Okay, is there anyone opposed? Okay, no, all right, motion carried. All right, so moving on to the second variance. So Robert, if you want to explain that one again. So even though we approved the initial variance, which is to, I'm assuming under the initial variance that those floating homes were in that variance, correct? And they're asking now to relocate them?
That's correct. So the initial variance that was just approved by the board to move forward was for the floating food court, as well as the 4 floating vessels to be located or remain in the marina.
So do we need to entertain this variance that we just approved the other one?
That would be up to the board's discretion. Like I stated, this new proposed location is that they're proposing on moving these 4 float homes into this new area. It's a separate water lot entirely, has its own separate PID. And then, again, we did some research and received some comments from other departments pertaining to this. But it would be, I guess, up to the board's discretion if you wish to entertain this application.
It just seems odd to me that we would approve a variance for those floating homes to be in the initial PID, only to follow up and vote on to move them. It kind of contradicts themselves a little bit.
Could I speak to that, Greg? Are you sure the developers are moving them this year? There was concern that due to the shortened season and the financial burden that they weren't going to move them. So did they apply for this? And
They must have applied for it.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Drawn. Again, when I was discussing all 3 applications with the applicant, the Gales, they were adamant that they also wanted to apply for this because they, at the time, stated that they could possibly relocate the 4 float homes to this new area due to potential noise issues that could be coming from the adjacent restaurants as well as the floating court. There's, I guess, some concerns that occupants of the vessels would enjoy better peace and privacy in this new location, and that's why they made the application to potentially move these float homes to this new lot.
Mr. Chair, it's Alex. Look, the other concern in regard to that location is that the fire department is asking for some upgrades to improve fire safety there. I mean, I have no idea the cost of that. It may be not significant, or it may be significant, but our concern is that, if you do approve it, there's an expectation different from last year that if they make those upgrades, then and if it doesn't get approved in the future after this year, then it's tricky in regard to those upgrades have been made.
But I thought this was the initial plan, was to proceed on status quo, and then do our research on a framework for any proposed changes in the future, and then deal with that at a later time. So again, I think this is the part that I think that probably confused me the most. It's status quo, but it's not status quo. Okay, yes.
Mr. Chair, could I ask for a deferral on number 2? just in light of
Well-
what Alex just mentioned.
Well, the
And again-
season's short, Your Worship, and I just honestly either we think it's a good idea, or we just say, listen, we're gonna basically, well, pardon the pun, but dock it till we have a framework in place.
Well, I'd like to have the fire issue addressed, if that could be addressed. And if we have to meet, we have a meeting on Monday for planning board and planning committee. So it can be brought forward then, but again, I know when we spoke with the Gales last week or 2 weeks ago, we were just talking about what's there now, and this is a change. So is it possible deferral? What's your wish, Mr. Chair? Thank you.
Well, I've had conversations, of course, with others as well. I mean, I spoke with the CEO at the port, and there's certainly concerns with when the cruise ship industry, kicks back into high gear next year. That when these cruise ships come in, if they ever have to turn in a tight radius, and their thrusters are pushing a lot of water, that there's concerns around that as well. So again, I think there's lots of questions to be answered. And I don't want anyone to feel that they have a gun to their head here to have to make a rash decision. It's a lot to digest in a very short period of time. Our goal was to make sure that we got these folks up and operational as quickly as possible in a temporary use for this year. And then again, going back and allowing the planning staff to do the research, their homework, and to come back with a regulatory framework that, again, that's researched and has the answers that we need in order to make a good, sound decision.
So, Mr. Chair, variance 1 and 3 would be status quo. Variance number 2 is new, and that's why I'm asking if we can defer it and just go to number 3 and get this done, because number 3 is steamers is just going back to its same old location, right, Alex?
I guess the question. So does that? Okay. Well, let's move. Okay. So number 2, just if someone wants to put a motion on the floor, you can put any motion on the floor you want. But I'm not sure what are you deferring it for, though? I guess that's the question.
For more information from the fire, and again, I didn't know about the Mike Cochran with the Charlottetown Harbor Authority. That should be brought into consideration, and I think that was
Your Worship, it's in the letters there from Mr. Cochran, and and again, I just throw this out depending on how you want to deal with this, but staff aren't averse to them going back to the previous location, and then that's one of your options available to you as well. If you want to expedite that because it is a short season, that's an option that's available to you as well.
What's your wish, Mr. Chair?
Chair, can I make a comment?
Yes.
Yeah, I think with this in front of us, and having approved what's the status quo on the previous one, it's not hard to deal with this issue, and we should deal with it. I don't think this should be left outstanding. I think we should just deal with it now.
Okay. So does someone want to put a motion on the floor, either to defer, reject, or approve?
Okay, I'll move that we reject this proposal.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to reject the second variance, which is to relocate the floating homes to the outside of Confederation Landing. Do I have anyone to second that? Nope. Everyone can hear me?
Second.
Okay, so I have a seconder. Perfect. Is there any further questions, comments? Okay, so all in favor of rejecting number 2?
Aye.
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 Yes.
So they're just not going to be allowed to move, right?
That's right.
Correct. They can still have the. Okay, so again, opposed? Anyone opposed to rejecting? Okay, last call. Anyone opposed? Okay. All right. Motion carried. Councillor Drawn, yes. All we're doing is saying that they're allowed to operate those 4 floating homes within the marina where they were last year. We're just saying no to relocating them this year outside of Confederation Landing until more research is done.
Perfect.
So again, that maintains so far as we're going along here. So everything at Peaks Key that was there last year is based on our vote so far. The 2 variances are allowed to operate as it did last year. Now moving to the third variance, which is the one that's over closer to the Court. And again, that is to operate again, what we're seeing the picture of, the old steamers.
Yeah, I moved accepted.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to accept it.
I'll second.
Second. Okay. So moved and seconded. Is there any comments or questions with regards to this application? Okay. Hearing none. All in favor?
Oh, no, I have a question. Is it the same size as last year's?
That is the intent. I think it's again was the intent was to maintain the same. Alex, do you want to confirm, or Robert?
Yeah, well, you just need to just make sure that clarify when you approve it that the intent is to approve what was there last year. We will make sure that it makes it into the resolution for the council meeting, the next council meeting. That it's intended to permit what was there last year. We'll do the same with the first one, and that the floating docks be where they were located last year.
Yeah, and same square footage.
Right.
And the recommendations that are in front of us, right now, those are the recommendations also for the steamers?
Right. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Question?
Okay, so we moved in second. So, all right. Any other questions, comments? Okay. Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Yes.
Is there anyone opposed? Okay, hearing none. Motion is carried. So I think, folks, as confusing as that was, we wrapped it up. So thank you to the planning staff. I know this is a difficult application because of unknowns, but I appreciate everyone's patience and your time. Thank you so much. And I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
All right, folks. Thank you so much.